Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my Daily Dose with Tim. Today is season 2, episode 43, and that means we are on part 2 of income properties today. And first thing first, I want to say thank you to those of you who actually reached out to me to see if I am okay, because some of you guys, if you have been watching and following every single day, you know that there was a bit of a gap between episode 42 to now. I'm okay. Thank you so much for asking. Just had some challenges in terms of health, and also we actually ran a lease options boot camp. So just to make sure that I was not overextending myself physically. And remember, that is one of my top values and one of the values for Treasure Talent as well, which is health and sustainability. And so in order for me to be sustainable here and continue to produce these content for you, I decided that I needed to make sure that I was well balanced in getting some rest as well, while still working and driving towards my personal goals. So I am back here. Don't you worry. We're going to keep going and carry on with part 2 of income properties. And today, really, over the next few days, I want to get into what we call income properties KPIs. What are KPIs? Some of you guys that have come from the corporate world like I did, KPIs stand for key performance indicators. So I'm going to write this out for some of you guys if this is a new term for you. So it stands for key performance indicators. So remember, we always say when we invest, we focus on the performance of an asset, because nobody, I don't know about you, nobody that I know ever want to hang on to non-performing assets. That's like getting your retirement statements, your RSP statements, your 401ks, your whatever it is that you've parked your money in, or even your stock portfolio. When you're looking at the value of it, you're like, it's not really performing. In fact, the value is going down overall and I haven't made any money yet. Or, yeah, I've made some money, but it's not doing as well as I would like it to do. And so we keep emphasizing on performance, and that's why we now want to focus on key performance indicators. Now, during part 1 of income properties, we already went over the fact that we listed out what the potential revenue streams could be and what the potential expenses are. And some of you guys actually reminded me, because it's something that we've had some experience with ourselves as well in our portfolio. It doesn't happen a lot, and that's probably why it skipped my mind, because as you know, I don't script any of these things. I just feel like there's usually a natural flow to what I do here. However, one of the potential revenue streams when it comes to income properties, because I did talk about advertising billboard spaces, and the other side of all of that is cell phone towers potentially. Now, about 7-8 years ago, when we first started acquiring larger scale income properties, and that means we had the land, we had the rooftop space, and sometimes even spots on your within your property line that you didn't even think about, and you would get approached by the telecommunication companies, and they would want to plant a cell tower there, or a transmitter basically on your properties. And this is why if you drive around these days and you look on top of tall buildings, or even in my experience so far, churches have a lot of these, because usually they have giant signs. However, within those signs now, it's actually a lot more aesthetic these days. You don't always get to see the antennas or the satellite dishes. However, some of them are still exposed, but most of them are now being covered. And what I found is really places of worship. They actually have a lot of these cell phone towers and antennas right sitting on top of their buildings. And that's actually another revenue stream as well that you can count. Used to be that we could submit bids, not anymore these days. At least that's my understanding of it. Again, I'm in Canada. Depending on where you are and where you're watching this, if you've got personal connections, or if you're in the telecommunication industry, that's something that you might be able to look into as well, pull some personal strings. So thank you for reminding me to share that with everybody else as well. You know who you are. And so coming back here in terms of KPIs, we talked about the fact that revenue minus expenses equals our NOI in this case, and then we're going to minus our debt servicing, and that becomes our cash flow. So today I want to focus on 2 KPIs with you. The two key performance indicators that we're going to touch on are cap rate and rental yields. And it's what's really funny to me though is like I feel like cap rate is one of those catchphrases a lot of the industry people use. However, a lot of the investors don't fully understand it. And even when they do understand the definition behind what cap rate is, it's hard for them to really interpret to themselves. Now, that's what I really want to share with everybody is the fact that cap rate by definition, yes, you know what, you want it to be as high as possible. And the definition behind it or the formula behind it in terms of how you get cap rate is you would use NOI. So your net operating income now, if you remember, I'm going to do a line here, right here. You're going to take your NOI and then you're going to divide by your purchase price. Okay, your purchase price. And this is how you get your cap rate. And so right now, I also want to share with everybody that cap is actually not an acronym. It's just a short form for capitalization. It's called cap rate for short. However, it really stands for capitalization rate. Now, if you think about the math now, it really makes sense because this is the running joke that I have with a lot of the investors, especially when they're, still really learning to convert into the investor's mindset and they live in very expensive home markets like Toronto, Vancouver, Seattle, Singapore, Hong Kong, New York, Chicago, LA, for example. So these are the people that usually look at cap rates and go, oh my God, the cap rates are so ridiculously low. Because at the end of the day, yes, you want it to be high. Why? Because cap rate effectively, if it's capitalization rate, that basically is a very quick indicator, a short math number that indicates how hard your capital is working for you. And so one of the things that we always talk about is people complaining about being in very expensive markets. They can buy something, however, nothing cash flows, and therefore they understand that they're being exposed to risk. And these are usually the investors that are in training, meaning that they're starting to understand why cash flow is very important. However, they're still not adapting to the whole S&P process that we are teaching them in the sense that you go where the money is. So if your home market does not work, you go somewhere else where the numbers actually work in your favor. So you're not taking on any risk. And what's really funny is that these days I'm actually rereading one of my favorite books by Robert Kiyosaki called Cash Flow Quadrant. And he's talking about how one of the biggest lessons that he learned from his rich dad is the fact that if you're going to take on debt and risk, you better get paid for it. And how do you get paid for it? The very simple form to think about that is, once again, monthly cash flow. So coming back here now, capitalization rate, if you're in big cities, a lot of the times, obviously, if you're in negative cash flow, then we're not even going to go there, okay? Usually, because at the moment, cash flow does not even go into the calculation. However, before debt servicing, there's a very high potential that you might still be making some money. At least I hope for your sake that you are, because the running joke is, well, nothing cash flows. And my answer has always been, actually, potentially, yes, I hope you are from an NOI perspective, because if there's no debt servicing, meaning you're buying everything cash, then hopefully there is cash flow, okay? Anyways, I don't know if everybody got that joke, but hopefully you will in time. Now, coming back here though, NOI divided by purchase price. And this is why for me, when it comes to performance indicators, I still further break it down in terms of, is it actually performance by asset? Okay, whoops, probably should write it in a different way, easier. Okay, so whoopsie, draw performance. Ooh, I'm still on eraser. There we go. So because they're performance indicators, I still further break it down. Is it performance by the asset or market performance indicator? Those are still the two things that I look at, simply because of the fact that if your NOI is considerably high, that means your asset is actually performing really well. Because why? That means maybe you got good revenue and you've got your expenses controlled really, really well. And so that means your asset is performing at a very, very reasonable rate. However, if you're in a market where purchase price is very, very high, and as a result, when you factor in debt servicing, you don't have cash flow left or in your negatives, well, then again, it's still not a piece of performing asset. However, and this is why I tend to say that cap rate, in my opinion, is a market indicator. Because let me put it this way. If you're my American friends, you can go to the Midwest. Okay? You can go to the Midwest and let's just say that you can buy 100 units somewhere in a state, and you will have an NOI of $100,000 on an annual basis. And then if you have a purchase price of $2 million, okay, then now you can see what is your cap rate. What is your cap rate there? 100,000, okay? It's probably gonna be way better than that, but let's just put it this way, okay? This is all for demonstration to give you the idea. So that's 5% right there. However, you can buy a building that will also give you the exact same amount of net operating income. However, you are in a ridiculously expensive market. You're in a market where you have to buy this property for $10 million. Then guess what? You now have a 1% cap rate. So that's the funny thing. And this is why I said, to me, a cap rate is a market indicator, not an asset performance indicator, largely. Obviously, we're not taking debt servicing into consideration yet, because when we do that, if we're taking cash flow or annualized cash flow, and then we divide it by anything else, then really what we're looking to find now is cash on cash return in this particular case. So we're going to talk about that later. That's not today. Okay, so I really just want to make sure that everybody understands the main difference between what an asset performance is determined versus market performance. And this is also why the second portion of today's KPI is rental yields. So rental yields, very, very straightforward here. I'm going to use a different color quickly. And that means your annualized rent divided by your purchase price. So a lot of the times, I think most people that I understand are starting to learn about how to invest in real estate, especially going into income property. So long-term holds, for example. And honestly, though, in my opinion, long-terms is 5-10 years, nothing more longer than that, because I keep saying this, buildings are like people. The older we get, the more problems we have, and that's a whole other issue, okay? If we go back to episode 42, part 1 of income properties, then you understand at the end of the day, it's finding that balance between your revenue growth and really controlling your expenses. So coming back here now on rental yields, this is actually the formula that we're discussing. And a lot of the times people are looking for what we call the 1% rule, the 1% per month rule. And that really works out to be a 12% yield. That's what people are actually referring to. So for example, if you buy a property for $500,000, ideally, you need to have $60,000 in annual rent. So divided by 12 months, that means you need to achieve $5,000 in annual revenue. So I'm gonna switch rent up for revenue, because depending on where you live, even on a single family property, you could sometimes suite it or duplex it, whatever you wanna call it. And that way you have two rents coming in from that property. And if you do have a detached garage space that you can rent out, then what that means is you can actually rent it out separately too. And so in that case, maybe depending on the market that you're in and what the market can bear, you can potentially achieve that amount. However, I understand that across a lot of the Canadian cities, especially, that is not a number that is very easy to achieve when it comes to the 1% rule. But again, doesn't mean that they do not exist. Why? Because at the end of the day, purchase price can be determined by a lot of factors. And this is why creative financing, when it comes to acquisition, is so important. And that's the funny thing too, the acquisition stage of any transaction is where we actually need the most amount of creative financing, because once you've acquired it, then the same formula applies to everybody. Revenue minus expenses equals your NOI minus your debt servicing. And how you acquire that property a lot of the times affects the debt servicing piece of that equation as well. So that's the episode for today. I'm hoping that you guys got some insight into what cap rate stands for and the difference between asset performance versus market performance. And so as you can tell, same idea. Rental yields definitely falls under the market performance stage, in my opinion, because once again, especially when it comes to annualized rent right here, your market factors play a very, very heavy weight on that, because it comes back to the economic drivers in that particular market that you go into, and also the purchase price is also very much driven by supply and demand. So rental yields and cap rates are the two things that we looked at, and they are market performance indicators. So don't confuse those with asset performance indicators, because we're going to go into that as well, and we will draw that line further for everybody. So once again, thank you very much for joining me for today's episode. I'm going to keep coming at you. We still got 16 more episodes to go for season 2 before we get into the holidays. So thank you so very much again. I appreciate you liking, commenting. If you got any questions, make sure you comment on the videos and like the videos, so that you can help me share the message to the people that you think really can benefit from it. And obviously, please share when you get a chance. So thank you very much again. I will see you back here next time. Live well, everybody.